Tonight, we're taking a deep dive, the type of story you're not going to see anywhere else in the Northwest. We're going to spend some extra time tonight and talk about privilege and alcohol and the folks at the very top of Oregon's alcohol food chain who found it impossible to keep their hands out of the cookie jar. No one stole that we're aware of, but they certainly used their positions to elbow out the common drinker who would have loved to have gotten their hands on a bottle of rare bourbon. Instead, it went to some of the privileged few, including the recently resigned executive director of the OLCC. And now the leader of the commission, who was supposed to be keeping an eye on the former executive director, well, he's complaining about his treatment in the press. Lots to talk about tonight in what we're calling Bourbongate. It's our big story. To set the scene, Oregon is a place where all the hard liquor is controlled by the state and it's taxed by the state. The OLCC operates a state-run monopoly. It's done through something called the Distilled Spirits Program. The program buys the booze, puts it in warehouses, then sells it to Oregon's independently operated liquor stores. One of the most coveted bottles that passes through the OLCC is a Kentucky bourbon called Pappy Van Winkle. It's made in small batches and aged as long as 23 years. According to an investigation uncovered by the Oregonian, for several years, top managers at the OLCC had some of the bottles set aside before the public could buy them so that they, the top managers, could jump the line, as it were, and purchase the bourbon for themselves. The bottles go for about $300 retail and can fetch $2,000 or more on the illegal market. So yes, it is rare. In fact, it's so rare the state even holds a lottery to give people a chance to buy it. Now, another popular and rare bourbon involved here is Elmer T. Lee. The Oregonian filed an open records request and got the details of an OLCC investigation that took place last year. It found the practice of setting aside the rare spirits has gone on for at least 8 years, and it involved 6 top managers, including that executive director, Steve Marks, and his second in command. Marks resigned effective today. Now, it's unclear who else was involved in getting the hard-to-find bottles. The Oregonian reports that a top OLCC official told an investigator that he set aside bottles hundreds of times and that some of the people he hooked up were state lawmakers. So, that's the background. Governor Kotek wanted Marks to resign before she learned about Bourbongate, and then we assume she really wanted him to afterwards. She's called for the firing, in fact, of everyone involved. The paper also reported that the scandal came to light last April after an employee complained, so came to light internally anyway. And then that raises the question, why are we just learning about this now? Who's in charge of the OLCC? Who's supposed to be watching over these folks? Well, that's the volunteer board of the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. Today, the board chair of the OLCC, clearly frustrated, gave an impromptu speech lasting more than 15 minutes. Did he direct his anger at the executives under his watch who abused their power? No. He seems mostly angry with the press. First, he wanted us to know board members are volunteers who work hard.
This board reviews an average of 200 pages. An average of 200 pages. Sometimes there's 400 and 500 pages that are given to us for a monthly meeting. There's so many issues involved in those 200 pages that we have to look at and understand and read. We are plain citizens. We are not employees of the state of Oregon. We are not paid by the state of Oregon for anything we do other reimbursement for travel.
Okay, and he says they're regular folks, but they're not all plain citizens. The man talking, Paul Rosenbaum, the OLCC website tells me he's the chief executive of a company called SWR Corporation and previously served as the chairman of the board and the CEO for Rent-Track Corporation, which was based here in Portland. So you'd think he'd know all about keeping an eye on the top folks running things. He also wants you to know there's a lot of responsibility involved with the commission.
We grant authority after anybody will tell you, there's intense competition for people who want liquor stores in this state. And they come in front of us with presentations professional presentations you wouldn't believe. It's our decision to make a decision whether or not they get a license, their whole future's at stake. Any store that's already in existence and wants to leave, it's our responsibility to put a new license in for them. And there's plenty of people who want those licenses.
Okay, got it. That does seem like a lot, I'll give you that. But one responsibility he did not list: the Board of Commissioners picked the executive director who actually runs the OLCC. And you would think they'd keep an eye on that person to make sure they're doing a good job, sort of like any board would with a business leader. In terms of Bourbongate, Rosenbaum, the board chair, said they did not know anything about the practice of setting aside those rare bottles while it was going on.
What did we know? Nothing. Nothing. There is not one person up here who knew a thing about the process, the procedure, the thing we're all discussing today. Not one. Not one. And if we didn't know about it, and we didn't, then how could we participate in it? We didn't. So stop asking questions about that. I'm telling you, nobody knew anything about this.
And then he got to the question of when did he or the board learn about the investigation that showed the employees were getting special access to the rare spirits.
I have what you would call some additional responsibility. I knew about this issue about September 8th of last year.
Ah, yes. Now we're getting somewhere. Rosenbaum learned about the scandal last September. He was told there was a full investigation, finding of fact, and all things were documented and then put in the employee files. So 5 months ago, what did he do? He quickly took action to, well, actually, no, wait. He didn't do that. He kept quiet.
I was told, and it was true, that according to Oregon statute, these people were disciplined. Now here's the kicker to this whole thing. To me, I was told that this employment record was confidential. Let me say it again. It was confidential. Let me say it a third time so the press understands it more than anybody else. It was confidential. In this day and age, people think they can lie and it's perfectly okay. People think that confidential means that you breach it. You're looking at somebody when you say confidential, it means confidential. It means I am not going to break confidentiality.
Well, I think we can all respect that, but wasn't it his job to be kind of a watchdog as well? Shouldn't he have blown the whistle? Now look, if you have to keep the specifics confidential, if you think that's what you're doing under the law, okay. But how about firing the people who clearly have no clue about how they're violating the public trust?
Now 8 months later, when this blows up in the Oregonian, the New York Times, the New York Post, and everything else, you want to look at me and ask me, did I do the right thing? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I look at you and tell you without a doubt, this was the right thing to do. Confidentiality is confidentiality.
And missing the point is still missing the point. By the way, the investigation obviously was not confidential. It was released to the Oregonian under the Open Records Law. But the OLCC board chairman refuses to give any ground.
We're the most ethical people you ever want to see. These are all wonderful people. They're all business people. They're all doing this as a matter of public service. Don't knock them. Don't call on them to say their integrity or their reputation is at stake here. It's not. We're looking at you straight in the face and tell you we didn't do anything wrong.
Not sure if you noticed, but he literally was looking down when he said he'd look us in the face and say they did nothing wrong. So, what are your thoughts on all this? We've heard from several of you before today, so we know there is some elevated blood pressure out there on this tonight. Vent to us. Send us an email. You'll feel better. Send it to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.